What if the Cold War never ended? What if the Soviet Union, the superpower that once rivaled the United States, still existed today in 2025? Would we live in a world divided by iron and ideology, or one dominated by Soviet influence? The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, leaving behind 15 independent nations and a world order dominated by the United States. But imagine an alternate history where the Soviet Union never fell. What would life, politics, technology, and global power look like in 2025 under a still mighty USSR? In our timeline, the US emerged as the sole superpower. But with the Soviet Union still intact, we'd be living in a bipolar world, two titans constantly competing for influence. NATO would remain strong, but so would the Warsaw Pact, stretching from Eastern Europe deep into Asia. Instead of US-led globalization, we'd see two parallel worlds, Western capitalism versus Soviet socialism. Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and all the former republics would still be under Moscow's control. Oil-rich Central Asia would fuel the Soviet economy, while Eastern Europe would remain locked behind the Iron Curtain. If the USSR survived, the space race wouldn't have ended with America's dominance. By 2025, we could see Soviet colonies on the moon, massive space stations orbiting Earth, and maybe even a Mars program led by Moscow. Instead of Elon Musk and SpaceX, perhaps the Soviet Space Agency would have pioneered reusable rockets. But while the West thrived in open markets and innovation, Soviet tech might lag behind in consumer goods. Imagine clunky Soviet smartphones, state-controlled internet, and surveillance networks rivaling China's system today. Life for ordinary citizens would be drastically different. In the Soviet Union of 2025, consumer choice would remain limited, state-approved clothing, cars, and food supplies. Social media would be strictly censored, with platforms like TikTok or Instagram replaced by government-run networks spreading propaganda. But there would also be benefits: free healthcare, free education, and guaranteed jobs for all. Millions might avoid poverty, but at the cost of freedom, travel restrictions, and constant surveillance by the state. A surviving Soviet Union wouldn't just compete economically, it would remain a military juggernaut. In 2025, its armed forces could rival or even surpass NATO's. With nuclear arsenals on hair-trigger alert, the threat of World War III would hang over humanity every single day. US interventions in the Middle East? Unlikely. The Soviets would counter every move, backing their own allies. Instead of one global policeman, we'd have two rival enforcers constantly at risk of direct confrontation. The Soviet economy in 2025 would look radically different. With oil, gas, and vast resources, Moscow could challenge Western corporations with massive state-run industries. Instead of McDonald's and Apple, we might see Soviet fast food chains and state-owned tech giants dominating half the globe. Many nations in Africa, Latin America, and Asia would align with the USSR, receiving Soviet infrastructure, weapons, and aid. The world would be split into two competing economic blocs, with global trade and culture forever divided. If the Soviet Union still existed in 2025, our world would be one of constant rivalry, state control, and ideological struggle. We might enjoy stability and security in some areas, but live under the shadow of nuclear annihilation in others. So, would you choose a world of Western freedom and inequality, or Soviet equality and control? In the end, it's not just a question of history. It's a question of the future we imagine.